Hey guys, welcome back to the Elsa Kurt Show. I'm Elsa Kerr, and today I have a very special guest. I'm super excited. His name is Hersch Wilson, and he is the author of Firefighter Zen. And I have not read this whole book yet. I've read excerpts from it, and it is so good. So good. So, Hersch, thank you so much for coming on the show. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So I'd love to go kind of a little bit backwards before we go into the book right away. I love hearing backstories. I need to know, when did you know that you were going to be, or you wanted to be, a firefighter?
I never even dreamt about being a firefighter
Really?
until I was in my 30s. And the story is my wife and I moved to New Mexico, and Lori, my wife, got a job at a conference center outside of Santa Fe. And it's a rural area. One day, a client tripped and broke her ankle. And there was nobody there with any medical training. And Lori was just embarrassed. You know, she's a very determined woman. So she said, this is never going to happen again on my watch. So she went to an emergency medical technician class. 8 months later, she graduated. And the instructor said, you know, to keep your skills up, why don't you join a volunteer fire department? So she thought that was a great idea. She came home and told me, and I said, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. I could not see myself as someone holding an axe or going into burning buildings or dealing with blood. That was just out of my comfort zone. But she dragged me to the meeting, and it was just being with a great group of people, and they sucked me in. So that was when I was, I think, 33.
Oh,
And that's
wow.
when I decided, yeah, this is something I need to do. This is something that really will change my life, which it did. So that's
That's
kind of our
amazing.
backstory. Yeah. So it's my
Yeah.
wife's fault.
Yeah, it's your wife's fault. I
Right.
love it. And that really does speak to the whole thing. When we talk about first responders, one thing that, we always say is I'm a, first responder family. And the thing we always say in here is that it's more than a job. It's more
Right.
than, it's a calling. And
Mm-hmm.
that's so true in this sense. And I find it so fascinating and really, really cool that your wife got the calling first and she dragged you along, almost
Right.
kicking and
Right.
screaming, right?
Kicking and screaming. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, were there moments early on where, because obviously you're answering calls, you're dealing with life and death situations and
Mm-hmm.
really, scary stuff and graphic things as well. Was there a point that you were like, no, I don't think I want this, or you were
Oh
all in?
yeah. Day one, I thought I don't want this. Our
Sure.
first meeting that I went to was a medical meeting, and I sat there at the table, and they were passing around a picture of a crash they'd had the day before, and it was, I mean, it's kind of brutal, and it was of a fatality. And I got this. They gave me the picture, and I almost passed out. And I said, no, this is not for me. And Lori turned to me and said, maybe you can just run the engines. So, I think part of it is when you step into that world, you realize that you're going to be dealing with life and death situations. You're going to be dealing with people in extremis, and that takes some time to get used to. And I think that the compelling thing is that you're helping people and you're there in their moments of crisis. So I think following that vocational need to help people and to be there when they need it, it really kind of eventually overcomes that fear of all the guckiness.
Mhm. Sure. Yeah, definitely sounds like, from what I've read and seen of you, that looks like exactly what your calling really was with this, is to help
Mm-hmm,
people in their time of need.
mm-hmm.
Firefighter Zen, such a great title, by the way, of course.
Thank you.
Was that always like the Buddhist philosophies and principles? Was that always a part of your life, or did you
No,
discover that later?
I discovered that later, and I
Okay.
think I've been asked this question before. And what conclusion I came to is being a firefighter or a first responder it's a different path to the same conclusions that Buddhism takes you, that there's suffering in life, and that the most important things we can do is to be kind and to help people. And that's how we kind of fulfill our mission in life, is by being kind and being helpful. And I think you learn that as a firefighter or a first responder. It's interesting, people always tell us that they think that the people we serve remember us because of our red trucks or police cars, right, and the sirens and all that kind of stuff. But in fact, where most people tell us what they remember is our kindness, is how little things get done by firefighters and first responders and police that are never talked about in the public, but we're always doing, shoveling a driveway, making sure somebody's got food, all that kind of stuff that firefighters and cops do that no one ever talks about.
That's so true. You're so right. And, it happens thousands of times a day across the country, all across the world.
Exactly.
And you don't hear about it. And
No.
it is. And God, you're so right. And, just by the simple presence, just their presence in your time of need, I think is so impactful and so powerful. And what a gift that is to be able to do that, and a responsibility, really.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Now, when did you start thinking about writing this book to help your fellow firefighters and just really humanity?
Right. Well, I'd always been a writer.
Okay.
And so, and as me, like within the first year, I said, these are amazing stories. Who knew what was going on in kind of first responder world? So the book was always in the back of my mind, but I didn't start seriously writing it until like 2016, when Lori said again, that you ought to write a book about being first responder. So it took me about 4 years of kind of collecting stories and talking to people, and then kind of sitting down and writing it, which is kind of typical.
Can you share, I don't want you to give away the book, of course, but
Sure.
Can you share one of your favorite or most memorable stories that had a huge impact on you?
Yeah, I talk about in the book, it's called The Glitch.
Mm-hmm.
And the glitch is that we all have plans for our life. We all, can say, I'm going to, go to high school, I'm going to go to college, I'm going to get married, I'm going to have a great job, I'm going to do all these things. And the glitch is that if something happens, right, the kind of most important rule of first responder life is that stuff happens, right? So our plans get derailed. So one call I remember that just stuck in my mind. It was a Christmas night, and it was a blizzard in Santa Fe. So the I-25, our interstate, was closed, and the police had it blocked off. And we got a page. And it was like 2 a.m. So I figured it was just a car accident, because that's what always happens in the winter. But it was garbled. So I didn't really hear the page clearly. So I rolled out, and the way we respond is some of us respond in our own cars. Others go to the station and pick up engines. That's typical volunteer life. So I rolled up, the scene was right by our house. So I rolled up to the scene, and then I heard the message clearly that there was a woman in the car who was giving birth, which is like, I don't want to do this, right? I don't want to be first, please.
Right.
Paramedics come. But I went over to the car, and fortunately the husband, who was a nurse, in the backseat of this little Toyota truck, was delivering the baby, right? And they had a birth plan. They knew they were going to the hospital the next day. But as with births, you never know, right? You never know. So it was snowing, it was cold, and the dad delivered the baby. I helped deliver the placenta. We wrapped the baby up. Right then, our medic unit showed up. We took the baby into the med unit where it's warm and drove him off to the hospital. But it was just a great example of plans don't work out, and that every once in a while there's a glitch. And I think part of living, not necessarily maturely, is it's like being able to adjust to situations, being able to be flexible, to be nimble, because life is always going to throw stuff at you. So that was just one of many, many examples of that kind of call. But anytime you deliver a baby, a friend of mine who's a paramedic said, delivering one baby, healthy baby, takes away 100 of bad calls, right? It's just a miracle of birth. Just does so much for us in terms of balancing out the scales.
Absolutely. And you're so right. For every horrible thing that you see and have to deal with in the line of your job, those moments, I love that was a moment that stood out for you, because that speaks so much to your character, really, that, you actually take the time to seek the joy in the world. And I think in such a career and such a path, as firefighting and being a police officer and all of our first responders, it is so easy to get immersed and drown in the
Absolutely.
ugliness of it.
Right.
And to offer something like this to show a different path and a different way, I think is so profound, and so useful.
I think from almost a philosophical point of view, you're exactly right. I think I think seeing a lot of tragedy and understanding deeply what life is about, that life is hard. What we're going through right now, and have gone through the last 3 years. We call it permanent whitewater, right? It is difficult, it is hard. And first responders, I think, we always talk about how first responders have to have a tough skin. And I think that's true. But on the other hand, I think being in this work kind of peels back the layers, and you get to see what life truly is. And then you have to make a choice.
Yes.
You have to make a choice. I can get subsumed into the tragedy and kind of be a nihilist about it, or I can say, my God, life is short. But I have kids that I love, I have family that I love, I have friends that I love. I'm only here for a short period of time. What am I going to do with that? And one choice is to be joyful, to help others, and in helping others and being kind, you kind of find that joy. But that's a choice we all can make in our lives.
Yeah, I agree. I love that the lessons in your stories kind of always come back to that message that, all of these terrible things happen, and you can either be in this place mentally with it, or you can be in this place and it is a choice, and you do get to make that choice of which mental state you're gonna live in, And I also love that this is like in law enforcement, particularly because that's kind of like my area or my family. So I tend to kind of go to that as a default, but
Sure.
to all of I'm trying to generalize and say first responders, so we're all included. We're so busy now at this stage of the game, basically putting Band-Aids on, these deep mental, emotional wounds that our first responders are experiencing because of being unable to process what goes on in the job.
Sure.
And, and of course the stigma, the mental health stigma and the struggle, that you're supposed to always have this strong exterior and, never let them see, all of that stuff. And what I love so much about your stories and the messages in there is it's actually like, it's a preventative almost, like I feel like it's a book that should go to all cadets, to
Right.
start off.
Me too.
Right?
Yay,
Yeah,
good idea.
Yes, absolutely. Can we,
Yeah.
anybody watching the show, whatever connections you have,
Yeah.
could you please get this book out to cadets and everyone in that field, going into that field, because I think it mentally prepares you. So I think that's brilliant. And the stories are so well told, by the way.
Thank you.
You're
Thank you.
such a great storyteller. Do you have other books out?
I've got a couple of books out, mostly in business.
Okay.
But the last book I wrote before Firefighter Zen was a book called Play to Win,
Okay.
Choosing growth over fear. And
Nice.
that was mostly a kind of a personal development book.
Awesome. Do you ever think you'll venture into fiction writing, or is it not your?
I wrote a novel, and I self-published a novel called Test of Faith, which was a wonderful experience. I loved it a lot. My mom liked the book.
That's all that matters.
That's all that matters. Mom likes the book. She's my toughest critic. But I know I have a novel in mind, and I'm writing a book on dogs right now. So I have a contract for that. And then after I get that, I'll probably finish up my novel. Yeah.
That's
I just
so
love writing. Yeah.
exciting.
Yeah.
And you're also a speaker. So you go around and you talk about the concepts and everything.
The Firefighter Zen. Yep. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
That is terrific. Oh, that's so great. Now let me sneak into the authorship version of this. We kind of made a
Sure.
segue into it. Tell me a little bit about your writing process with the book, because there's a lot of first responders who have said to me like, oh, I could write a book on all of the
Right.
things, right? And they
Right.
truly
Exactly.
could, and they truly
Yeah.
could. Tell me a little bit about your writing process with the book, with this particular book.
Sure. I think the most important thing, and I learned this from a friend a long time ago, is you want to write
Mm.
every day. Write. You know, don't let that kind of internal editor stop you, or don't push it off to the last thing. You have to write. I think not only do you have to write, but then you have to send stuff out and have people react to it, and you have to have a little bit of a tough skin for that. But the most important thing is to write. And I think what happens is people want to write, they think about writing, they buy a new computer, right?
They get
And
all
but
the
they don't,
things, right?
they get all
Yeah.
the things. And I've spent I think literally days and days and days cleaning my office rather than writing. But the first thing is you have to write. That's number one. And Natalie Shapiro, who is a kind of a guru of writing, says when she's asked the question, "How do you become a writer?" she just goes like this: just write,
Yes.
write. So that's the most important thing. I think for me, it's kind of easy because I grew up as a writer. I've always been a writer. Um, and so it's natural, and I enjoy the process. I think that's part two, is you have to enjoy the process, because you never know if you can get published. You can't worry about people liking the book or liking what you're writing. You have to enjoy the process of writing. And writing for me has always been the way I explain the world to myself. Once I can write something down, whatever I'm working with or whatever is confusing me, if I write, it helps me explain the world. So that's my natural process.
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
those two
same.
things. Yeah. I think a lot of people, they talk about two things. They talk about what time of the day do you write, right? And lots of people are dedicated to getting up early in the morning and writing. And I did that for one book I wrote when I didn't have kids.
Yeah, that'll derail
Right.
a lot
Yeah.
of plans.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. Exactly. But now I find, because I have the time, but I try and write for block out 4 hours a day right now
Nice.
because I'm on a book contract. So, so I think got to write, got to enjoy the process, right? I think you have to. People get confused about, do I need to write about stuff I know? How can I do that if I'm trying to write a novel, right? So I think it's two different answers. It's start with writing stuff you know, right? And find your voice, find your voice, find your voice, find your voice. And then use your imagination, and you can push those things to write novels.
Absolutely. I agree with you on all points. I think the one thing that holds everybody back, of course, from everything and anything is such a general statement, but in this case specifically, it's fear. It's fear of being judged, fear of not being
Yeah,
good enough, fear, all
yeah,
of those things. And I always tell aspiring writers, pretty much the same advice. Just sit down and write. Don't worry about if it's good. Don't worry about any of the things. Just purge, just get the words out. And even if you never do anything with it, even if you never share it, it's such a catharsis, I think, for.
yes,
And
yeah,
so I think for people, and especially in first responder world, I think it is the default to hold things in, and not speak about the things
right.
that are bad or upsetting or scary. And oh boy, just to be able to sit down and write it, I wish that could be a course or a part of their training too, that you must sit, every day
Yeah,
and purge all of these things.
right. But I think go back to your idea of fear, because I think that's really, really important. I mean, um, the best writers, so for example, they all are terrified, right, at some level about being rejected. I mean, it's like being an actor, right?
Yes.
I was in theater for a long time, and I think you just have to get used to being rejected. You just have to get used to that. And there's this guy in Canada who it was this great story. He was dumped by his girlfriend and he was so devastated. But his response to that was say, I'm going to go out and get rejected every day. I'm just going to go out and find things that where I get rejected every day. So I'm going to build that muscle. So I get used, so he applied for jobs, got rejected, submitted articles, got rejected, asked people out, got rejected. I mean, just did this for like 6 months of constantly being rejected. And he built that muscle so it didn't bother him anymore. But when you're not rejected a lot, I think we're in fear of it, right? Yes. It becomes this massive boogeyman that we're just afraid to deal with. And I think as a writer, because one of the problems with writing is that there's not a lot of feedback. You sit down and write a book and it could take years, right? And you're not getting a lot of feedback. So you're not getting rejected a lot. You're not getting to toughen that muscle. And so you have to go find other ways to kind of toughen that up. And the thing is, you're not going to die, right? Rejection is not death, although we make up that it's death.
Yes.
But it's not death. And I think that's why you just have to trust the process, sit down and write, enjoy the process, not worry about success or failure, because either success or failure, Kahlil Gibran used to say that success and failure are both, are both dreams that we have that are illusions, right? They're just illusions, and we just have to really enjoy our daily process.
Absolutely. Yeah, that is so spot on. You couldn't possibly give greater advice. It's such great advice. It's so true. I can certainly relate to that. I remember when I published my first book, I got to a point where I was almost begging for a bad review because I wanted to get it over and done with. I just wanted to get that experience done, and see if I could handle it, test my fortitude, my strength. And yeah, I remember that the bad review that I got, the woman said that she found my writing pretentious.
Really?
And I went, okay, that stings. That
hurts, right? It's a knife.
Okay. And you said something really, really important about success and failure. And I think it goes hand in hand with praise and criticism, that you just can't take any of it too much to heart. Like you have to stay, right? You have to just stay true to what you feel passionate about, what you believe in, and what's important to you, and what your message is, and it'll reach the people it's meant to reach. Hopefully.
Agreed. I think you have to have a baseline. I interviewed this guy, he was a salesperson a long time ago, and he said, no matter what happens, they're not going to take away my children. They're not going to take away my house, right? They're not going to take away my income. I'm fine. And I think you have to be concrete in that way, no matter, because I think we go to I used to tell the story, it's like you get a bad review or you get fired, right? Or you make up you're going to get fired. You say, okay, I'm going to get fired. Oh my God, I'm going to lose my income. My husband's going to divorce me. My kids will leave me. I'll have to lose my house. I'll be living on the street. And that's how our brain works. We go right from a bad review or something bad happens at work. We go right to, I'm going to be living on the street. All of that is a fantasy. We just make that stuff up. And so you have to have, if you're going to do what you love in the world, if you're going to do what you love in the world, you have to be tough, and you have to kind of stick to your purpose and have boundaries about what can happen, what's realistic that can happen, and what's not. Because it's the belief, the kind of thinking about the stuff that could never happen, that gets into our brain and infects us, and then actually stops us, even though it's highly impossible. It's all impossible or improbable it will happen.
Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. And I hope anyone who's watching or listening to this will take that to heart, because you can't speak truer words. It's such a fact and wonderful. I want to change gears on you again.
Sure.
I must hear about your dogs. I must hear about your dogs. Yeah, and you write about your dogs. You blog about yes. So tell us a little bit about that. I'm so excited. I love them.
Sure. So I'm writing a book right now called Dog Lessons, Everything important about life you can learn from your dogs. And so we've always had dogs. I've had dogs since I was 10. And right now we have 2 rescues. We have a Great Pyrenees mix who's 2 years old named Toby. And we have, so the other dog, okay, there's a story. So on first responders, if you talk to first responders, they know one of the dogs that is the most terrifying is the Chihuahua. They are just, because they're relentlessly cruel.
Yes, they are.
And right. And so I've been the only dogs that really kind of had a problem with attack me was a Chihuahua. Right. And so I thought, well, we're never going to get a Chihuahua. I could never deal with a Chihuahua. But my daughter ended up adopting a Chihuahua off the street that was wandering around her street. And she took it in. She's got a little dog too. And she took it in and took care of it. But she was a medical student, so she couldn't have 2 dogs. So she ended up, my wife and my daughter, without telling me, transferred the little Chihuahua or half Chihuahua to us. So now we have a half Chihuahua named Maisie. And
That's awesome.
She's Braveheart. She's just the strongest, big-hearted dog, but she's really irritable, easy, right?
She's still true to her nature, right? True to her breed.
Absolutely a Chihuahua. Yes, exactly right. Right.
Oh, that's so great.
Yeah.
I love that you rescue, adopt and rescue dogs. That's so cool. Yeah.
They're a great lesson in resilience. I mean, what they go through, what dogs go through, who are rescue dogs, and they come from bad backgrounds sometimes. They end up living in shelters, but with a little love and about 6 months of patience, they just bounce right back. So it's so true. It's an interesting story.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. Of our 3 dogs, our rescue, he was found wandering the streets of Hartford, and which is a city here.
Yeah.
And little guy, he's Shih Tzu mix, and
right.
So he's a little fella,
yeah.
and he was found wandering the streets, and just the thought of that is so heartbreaking, because he's
so
just
yeah.
he's just this goofy tiny little guy in a big city. Just picturing it breaks my heart. And he truly is the most affectionate, lovable, devoted dog you could ever meet. And I hear that every time about rescues. I always hear that. So there's something to it.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's a good lesson for us that we can bounce back from most things. And I want to have the caveat that, it's going back to first responders, that I mean, PTSD is a real thing. And in 2019, in the firefighter world, there were more suicides than there were line of duty deaths. So we really deal with some tough stuff, and some people are really dealing with mental health issues. And I don't want to not acknowledge that. And I do a lot of work with helping with PTSD prevention and stuff like that. But I think, when I think about dogs, I think they have that resilience that we all have, right? That we all have, and we can bounce back from most things.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you're right. I think when someone is in the depths of their despair, they can't see that. They can't see outside of that. And what a valuable lesson that is, that we can take from animals, from dogs specifically, that, like you said, they can have the worst things happen to them, and they will still come to you with love and affection and trust, and with a little bit of work, it can change. All of that can change. And yes, and to keep with the PTSD and all of the stresses that they face on the job, often in silence. I'm so grateful that there are people like you out there doing what you do to help, combat the stigma and truly help these people who are putting their lives on the line and willing to put their lives on the line. We talk about it all the time. You are the people who run towards the danger while everybody else is running away. And I think society does us all a disservice when we ignore that and ignore them.
Absolutely. And I a shout out to the police. I know it's controversial, it's political, yada yada yada, but no one understands how incredibly difficult that job is.
Right.
It is just, and it's not the big call. I mean, we did a survey of, and this is on the fire side, but out of a review of 7 million calls, 7 million EMS calls, 2% of them were actually emergencies. But the rest of them, and every police officer will know this, is dealing with the mentally ill, it's dealing with substance abuse and domestic abuse and traffic stops, right? And that's, we call that the grind. And it is, and you can't really, I always believe, don't criticize somebody until you've stood in their shoes for a while, right?
Right.
And I think that's one of the things that we lack in our society, is that kind of empathy for that job, right? For that job.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
we
And
should be
I would
going after
say,
them.
yeah, absolutely. I would say for any of our first responders, and I include dispatchers in that, because I think
Absolutely.
they don't get enough credit and acknowledgement for the traumas that they could be experiencing
Mhm.
from the calls that they're taking and things that they're dealing with. So I include them in the first responder title.
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of say similar to them that, I have a very hard time taking someone seriously who has never, who criticizes and who has never spent a day of service in their life,
Right.
service
Right.
to others. And yeah, I will fight hard tooth and nail for all of you
Right.
guys, for what you do and what you're willing to do. And that's the catch right there. I hear, I'm sure you hear it too. Oh, you guys are, firefighters. Oh, you guys get to sleep for, blah, blah, blah. And cops, oh, you're
Right.
eating donuts in your cruiser
Right.
and,
Right.
all
Right.
those things. And,
Right.
it's not necessarily always what you're doing. It's what you're willing to do for complete
Yeah,
strangers.
that's a really
And,
good point. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
so yeah, from the bottom of my heart, I thank you. I thank all our firefighters for what they do. And I totally thank your wife for pulling you into that.
Right. Yeah, she's great. She's
She
great.
sounds great. You
Yeah.
sound like a
Yeah.
really great couple.
Right. She's a very determined woman.
I like her. I like her. I may have to beg her for an interview
Oh, she
too.
loved that. Yeah.
You too?
Sure.
Yeah. Oh, that would be
Yeah. Yeah.
so cool.
Yeah.
Hersch, tell me where everyone can find you. Where can we find your books, and where can we actually find you if you're doing any speaking engagements? I'd love to send people over to find you.
Sure. So the easiest way right now, I mean, your bookstores can order the book, order Firefighter Zen, but it's available on Amazon.com, of course. I have a website, herschwilson.com, and that's the easiest place to find both all of my written material, the videos I produce, and my speaking schedule. Of course, speaking schedules kind of went out the window with COVID, but hopefully we'll build those back.
Awesome. Yeah, we're slowly starting to round the corner of doing those events. I miss them like heck. I miss them a lot. I miss the actual connection with people. So
yeah, absolutely.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah,
Definitely.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
Hersch, I can't thank you enough for giving me some of your time and sharing
Thank
all
you
of
so
your
much.
wonderful stories. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank
And
you so much
best
for
of luck.
having me.
Absolutely. All right, guys, we will see you on the next episode, I hope. And I hope you're all doing well. Take care. See you next time.